Mesdames et messieurs,
The greatest festival of our contemporary society, the Olympic Games, is about to begin.
this is gonna be close.
Oh! They're all completely gassed! They've given it everything on the global bucket! Oh, yeah! Go! Oh!
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. But that is an Olympic championship.
Ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. Each week we share stories from athletes and people behind the scenes to help you have more fun watching the games. I am your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello,
I've got
how are
my
you?
apples and sugar cubes, so I am ready for today's show.
Yes, this is a big equestrian themed day. I'm very excited about it because we don't often talk about equestrian. It's not one of our strengths, but it's always fun watching
And we do
learning
know
about it.
I do love the horses. I do love them. I've only ridden
You do.
horses like a half a dozen times in my life, and I don't know anything about them, but I love them.
Well, we are back from Podfest Expo. We actually got to hang out in person.
I know
for
it was a
couple of
little
days.
strange.
Strange but awesome. And we got to learn a lot from Podfest Expo. We talked there as well about how we organized our time in China. So that was very cool. And we learned a lot of new stuff. So you may be seeing some changes on the show coming up. We're very
Maybe
excited.
we'll get a horse. Well, we've talked about having mascots, so maybe TKFLASTAN needs an official horse along with its official fox.
Put that on the list. Okay. So, Horse Talk Part 1. We are talking movie club today. Film Buff Fran is back with Jappeloup, the 2013 French film set in the world of equestrian show jumping. Take a listen. Fran, welcome back. We are talking Jappeloup, the movie about the horse that took Seoul 1988 by storm. Tell us all about it.
Well, this is a foreign language film, which is a little deviation from us. I think the last one we did was Gold, and we loved Gold. This movie was made in 2013. It is directed by Christian Duguay, and it stars Guillaume Canet as Pierre Durand, who is the equestrian who ends up buying Jappeloup from their owner and turning him into an Olympic champion. You know what? I didn't know what to expect from this movie. I didn't know anything about the equestrian. I purposely didn't look to see what happened in both the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles and the 1988 Seoul Games, just so I could just kind of enjoy the movie and see how it all plays out. And I thought this movie was really well done. It just had a lot of heart. It had a lot of feeling. It seemed like it had a very dense core. It just wasn't a sappy movie. And you really felt for all the characters. I think they gave very different nuanced performances, and you really knew how each of them felt. We start out with Pierre as a young boy, and you see him doing a different type of equestrian event, and he falls off his horse, and his mom is petrified. And then she tells her husband, Serge, to switch him to equestrian jumping because it's safer. And she doesn't want her son to get hurt. And so that starts Pierre's lifelong enjoyment of horse riding. And he actually stops riding and decides to become a lawyer. But then he's pulled back by his love of the sport when they decide to buy Jappeloup. What did you both think?
I loved it. It had all the tropes that we always talk about. The training montage,
Oh, yeah.
the romance, the, underdog, the come from behind, the tragic death of the father,
Oh,
the
horrible.
the losing in 84 to come back and win. And yet the way they put this film together, like you said, the performances were very good. The heart was solid. It did not feel schmaltzy.
No. And it had
It
George
felt,
Michael.
and it had some wild
Music was
background
great.
music. Yeah, we had some George Michael. We had some Talking Heads. I did not understand why that was there.
And we had Donald
And it
Sutherland. What more could you ask for?
random cameo by Donald Sutherland as the grizzled American. And the other thing that this had, which we seem to have forgotten as a trope when we go to European movies, namely Chariots of Fire, the obnoxious American athlete who yet has a good, has a good heart and takes it up. So this reminded me in some ways of Chariots of Fire in that it has all the tropes and yet it came together
Mhm.
to be a really, really enjoyable film.
I would have to agree. When we got to the end, I was like, oh, I really enjoyed it. Really well done. Really good biopic.
Mm.
I have some issues with the timelines and what's going on, but I have a lot of little nitpicky details where I spent a good chunk of the first section of the movie wondering how old he was, and I did a lot of math as the dates came up to try to figure out how old is he now? Wait a second, how old was he then?
Yeah,
But
nobody aged. The main body of the film, there's the flashback to 74 and then up to 78. So there's about 10 years that this film really covers. And nobody ages except their baby Lisa, who between two scenes seems to age a year. Like all of a sudden she's a bald baby and then in the next scene she's a toddler with a
Mhm.
full head of hair.
right, well, okay, so in 1974, when they did the original young Pierre doing his eventing, he looked like he was about 9 or so. And then all of a sudden in 1978, he's getting a law degree. And I was like, "Wait a second. How old is he?" And it turned out when I did the math, he was supposed to be about 20 in 1974
Huh.
because I believe he was born in about 1955. So he was closer to 20. And then that made sense when he was getting the law degree and he was in his mid 20s, late 20s. By 1980, 6 years after the original race, he's a lawyer and he quit jumping because he was mid 20s and he was college and there was like no money in it. I also wondered how long was his wife pregnant? And when was she pregnant? Because they had that scene, where he said, "I'm late," and she goes, "So am I." And you're like, "Oh, she's pregnant." But then it looked like they went to the next scene was their wedding, and then, like, a while later, I don't know how long it was until she tells him that she's pregnant. She's quitting writing. She's gonna quit writing for
Mhm.
9 months. And so she's been pregnant for a while because she knows and she tells him. He's all excited. And then, like, she's pregnant through the press conference for LA 84 and pregnant, very, very pregnant and in Los Angeles. And I thought, well, this is the 80s. How did they let her fly? But okay. And then, like, she was pregnant after that. And after LA 84, they went to the beach and she's still very pregnant. And they're back in France, I think, at this point in time. Like, how much more pregnant? She was pregnant for a little while longer, and then she had the baby.
Well, I can tell you that sometimes when you are pregnant, Fran knows this better than I, it feels like it's 14
Forever.
years.
Mhm. It feels
But
like
yes, I
forever.
have to agree, the pregnancy timeline and then the baby's aging timeline, because then 88 comes and the baby's kind of a toddler, but she should be like 4.
Older. Yeah.
Right,
It was
right.
very odd.
Well,
And then
and
the
the
baby
baby
also
just
disappeared. It was like,
yes, for long t it's like she goes to these races, like, "Where's your baby? You just left it with grandma all the time?" Like, the little kid is a little I mean, she's a tiny baby, shouldn't be away from mom.
Well,
Really?
grandma
I don't
did
know.
not want to go to the races. Grandma was not watching. She wanted to be home.
she peeled potatoes because it eased her stress. Can we talk a little bit about how gorgeous that horse was?
Oh,
And just the
beautiful.
character of Jappeloup. I did like that they did not give the horse too much human personality. They gave it a personality. It was a
Mhm.
feisty horse. You had to handle it a certain way, but there weren't a lot of long, loving shots into the horse's
Mhm.
eyes. Just a
Mhm.
couple, and they were quick, so you got a feel of who this horse was, but
Mhm.
it wasn't so anthropomorphized as we've seen
Mhm.
in some other, Black Beauty and National
Mm.
Velvet and kind of those other horse movies. But
I thought it was
I had
really
to cheer for the
interesting.
horse because the horse was short.
They did make a big deal about how he was only like 15.2 hands high and he was a little feisty, tiny one. But I really felt for Pierre because I think the actor Guillaume Canet he really gave us the friction between his love of the sport and the feeling like, oh, this was like a childhood dream and I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And then when he's doing it, he's happy, but he's not. And he wants to go back. And he almost doesn't go back, I feel like, because he doesn't want to seem like he's giving up, his profession. Then there was also that conflict between him and his dad. Like, was he doing it for his dad more than himself? And, I thought it was really sweet when they showed the father and son getting in the trailer with the horse to all those shows and showing the real bond between the two men. And then they finally went back into the trailer to have the heart to heart about him coming back to the sport. And the father says to him, give me a break. You're doing this for you. You're doing it for me, but you're also doing it for yourself, and own up to it. You want to come back, not just for me.
Right. For the first good chunk of the movie, maybe through LA, I wasn't really getting it because Pierre and Jappeloup didn't seem to have that connection, or more so, Pierre did not have the connection with Jappeloup. And I was really upset because I'm like, where is this connection with the horse and the rider? Only to realize that in the actual story, that was part of the problem, is that he didn't connect. And I thought that was they did a really good job with that. And I mean, they made Pierre look like very much a jerk. Everyone was telling him, you are a jerk. And he's like, I'm no good. And like, you got to the Olympics, buddy.
Right.
What do you mean you're no good? But it was really interesting to see that kind of transition from a very selfish rider who didn't try to connect to somebody who understood, or who finally got the message, oh, I need to do something different. And that difference was the way he became the champion.
I thought
Yeah.
the only somewhat wasted character was Raffaella, who was the trainer, who was the only one who could work with Jappeloup. She was the one who could speak his language and connect. And she is the one who tells Pierre, you don't love this horse. You're not connecting with this horse. You have to connect. And that's why the horse refuses to jump for you. And she had a few moments, but I did want a little bit more of her.
Yeah, you saw her like in the stable, but you didn't see her out there really like with the horse and the horse really going to her versus, or having those moments between the bond. I would agree. And also Raffaella did not age beyond like 16.
Again, another non-aging person.
But you know what? They showed it at the beginning. Like, I thought in the beginning they showed that bond really well because she was the original owner of the horse, and then her father made the hard decision to sell Jappeloup to Pierre. And you really saw her being so crestfallen. Like, this was her best friend. And then he was going away. And then when Pierre saw that, the only one to really get through to this horse was her, and then giving her the job of being his caretaker, she really lit up. And then the only other thing we really saw about her was when she was a wild child at the cafe, giving him
So-
The gypsy blood?
attitude, which was great.
So much smoking in this movie.
Like
In
the
hotel
teammate
in
who would
Los
smoke.
Angeles. Oh my gosh, in the hotel.
And yeah, like you were saying, Jill, the teammate is smoking as he is riding the horse.
I love the Raphael's grandfather who says, oh, she has gypsy blood. Like, oh boy.
But he also had one of the best lines in the movies where he starts complaining about the Americans and someone says, no, that writer's German. And he says, same thing.
So he's a man after your own heart, Alison.
I know. I said, oh. He also reminded me of the brother from Cutting Edge. The smart aleck in the bar. There always has to be a smart aleck in the bar.
The movie had enough poignant moments to really keep you almost on the edge of your seat when they went to the first Olympics and they were doing really well and it came down to Pierre, and then the horse causes Pierre to fall and he just loses all the chance to do anything. That was pretty shocking. I think they did a really good job portraying that episode really well. And also the fire. I mean, the fire was really crazy I mean, when the stalls that the horses were in were at a gas station, and all of a sudden they were driving by in a different car and saw that it was on fire, and they had to get all the horses out.
Do we know if that really happened? Because it feels like they would not have included that incident
If it
without that
didn't,
having actually happened. It seems so specific.
I was trying to look at some background information before we started, and I couldn't find anything, but it seemed like it may have happened.
Because how horrific that they're trying to get the horses out of the trailer, and he gets the horse out, but then Jappeloup runs into the highway. But of
Mhm.
course, the point of that scene being that Pierre is then able to talk Jappeloup down and they're connected and they are one, they are a team, which was beautiful.
Oh, we also forgot the trope of the bad coach. The
I have to
bad
say that
evil
trope,
coach.
that didn't bother me as much simply because it was such a tiny part of the story. It's basically 2 scenes and then he's done. And he's just a bad coach. I don't know
Mm.
how evil he is.
Well, I had the question because when they showed Jappeloup getting injured potentially at one of the meets, and then they threw up the thought that one of the other competitors on his same team saw the coach map out the course, and he kind of almost indicated that he mapped it out incorrectly. And then the question was it done on purpose so that Jappeloup would not succeed? Or was it just he just screwed up? So I thought that was kind of interesting that they almost pointed out that the coach was actually against Pierre and Jappeloup. And I thought it was also interesting that the reason I think that Pierre stayed with Jappeloup that long was because he owned the horse. Because other riders, if they weren't gelling well and performing well, if they didn't own their horse, they would have just got moved to a different horse. Where Pierre, because he owned the horse, he dictated who rode him. And if he wanted to ride him, he was going to keep riding him. So I thought that was really interesting. That was a major component, I thought.
I hope horse people like the riding scenes because as a non-horse person, I thought they were shot very, very well. And I got a sense of what the tactics are. And are you going to be aggressive on time? Are you going for clean? How many strides between obstacles? I thought that was very well done. And I learned something about the sport, which I always love to do with a sport movie.
Right, and one of the things I also liked is the different angles they shot the jumps from. So sometimes it was underneath, sometimes it was from a side, sometimes it was from the back end. It was nice and it changed it up so it didn't always feel like the same competition.
And I think the most important thing with that too is that the most of the people involved in the movie were horse people. So the director was an equestrian. Guillaume Canet was a horseman. So was the woman who played his wife, Nadia. So there was so many equestrians on this film that I think that's probably what helped make the equestrian scene so vibrant and true to life. Guillaume Canet had actually given up on his equestrian career way before the movie, and then he had to get back in shape before they started filming, and he did all his jumping, and you could see that. I mean, they didn't cut away. You could tell it was him doing all the jumping, which was really interesting, and it just seemed very lifelike. You were there with him in the moment when he was doing everything.
And on that note of lifelike, I thought the Olympic scenes were very well done. They obviously had permission. They used the rings, they used the official Seoul emblems, the official Los Angeles emblems, and it felt like those Olympics did. Like when they showed the LA crowd, it looked like the LA crowd. When they showed the Seoul crowd, it looked like the Seoul Stadium. So that I thought was very good.
And they did a good recreation of the actual jumps in Seoul. They've got some clips on YouTube of him doing that final round, and you're like, wow, they really replicated those jumps very well.
Yeah, I read an article online before we started, and it said that they painstakingly recreated that course so it looked like it did.
Thankfully, it did not have the Tokyo obstacles and the sumo wrestler. What would Jappeloup have done with that?
And If we can go back to accuracy, what I'm curious about is the story of him deciding, okay, I'm going to sell Jappeloup. We're not working out. And the Americans want to buy him. Enter Donald Sutherland again. Then the sale falls through because the horse
He had a blood.
he had like a tick blood disease. Wait,
Mhm.
I wrote it down.
It's EP is the
Yes.
abbreviation.
Yes. So he's living with EP. And I did go off on a little tangent with what is this? And it was enough to the Americans to go, yeah, we're not buying this horse. And Pierre was just like, it's not a big deal. He's living with it.
Well, when you're
So
spending that kind of money, I guess the whole point is you want to have a clean, healthy animal because maybe it's
Mhm.
not as cut and dry that he could live with it moving forward.
I made a very strange jump with that. I thought there was a problem bringing that horse into the United States because of that. Once you know a horse has that contamination, for lack of a better word, was there issues? But then he was allowed to go to Korea for the Olympics. So I don't know if that was really true or if it is like Fran said, if you're going to pay 400K for a horse, you want him perfect.
Right, because I thought that as well. I thought that traveling would be an issue, and then I was like, well, but he went to Seoul, so that would be an issue anyway. I didn't quite understand that. I think it also felt like they needed a convenient out for him keeping the horse, and that just happened to fit. Whether or not it was true, I'd love to find out.
I believe it
But
was. In my research, he did
okay,
have it. Yep. In what I've read, he did have it. So, and that's
okay,
what made the Americans
wow,
decide not to
back
purchase
out.
him. In light of the fact that he had it, question really becomes, would Pierre have stopped the deal anyway and had a change of heart if he didn't have that escape route? I don't know. He said it himself. He was completely embarrassed and ashamed on worldwide TVs. Everybody showed how miserably he ended up. So he really was not in a place to continue moving forward with the sport. He was really ready to give it up. But, the really question was, would he have continued if the Americans didn't give him an easy out? It's a good question.
I thought it was very interesting when they were doing the scene with the press and Pierre was talking about how the press was just attacking him for all these losses. And I was thinking to myself, you're an equestrian. How much of a big deal is this? And then I found out that Jappeloup had a retirement party at the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, yeah, he was a big deal.
It was a big, big deal. So the story that they show of him just being vilified in the press was probably accurate.
Yeah, I mean,
They
I
gave
think
a
that
horse a retirement party at the Eiffel Tower.
there was a statue of him at the Olympic Museum for a long time too, until they brought it back to Pierre's home. But yeah, it's being in the United States, where we have so much emphasis on different sports. For us in the Olympics, you think in the Summer Olympics, you think track and field, you think swimming, you think gymnastics. Unfortunately, the equestrian events kind of take a back seat. Whereas I don't know how they fall, with the Europeans. I mean, Europe has had such a long history of equestrian events, and people have been riding horses in Europe way longer than they've ever had in the Americas that we know of. So you wonder how important the sport is to certain cultures. I mean, it sounded like it was a big deal to the French. I mean, they did not like losing at all.
Right, and when you look at the medal counts in Seoul, France only won 16 medals the whole games, and 6 of them were gold, and 1 of them was for Jappeloup. And then the US, who finished 3rd in the medal table, they got 94 medals, 36 of them gold. In our country, we're so used to winning. So I wonder if it's we have a champion for once in who knows how long, and we're just trying to rally all behind that champion.
And it's a perfect little horse.
And Pierre, too, he was such a flawed individual. He was so complex and flawed, yet you wanted to root for him. You wanted him to succeed. He was likable enough that you wanted to see him do his best with his horse. Where other characters we've seen, you could care less, how they do. But for him, I was like, come on, man, get with it. Find some communion with your horse. You have to bond with the horse so you can win.
I wonder how many horses they used in the film because I didn't notice, "Oh, that horse looks a little different." I mean, it was a
Well,
very distinct looking horse.
yes. And I just read an article before we went on, and they used, I believe, 5 or 6 horses. They were all different breeds. So they were a little concerned because they said they used a smaller horse that looked more like Jappeloup for the more close shots. But then they used a larger Andalusian horse in the jumping because the one that looked the most like Jappeloup was older. So they didn't want to stress the horse too much. So I thought that was really interesting that they did use a couple of horses as Jappeloup during the film. So spoiler alert, at the LA Games, he has such a rotten fall and it does not place in the medal count. So he goes back to Seoul, and the team from France actually places third in the team equestrian jumping event. And then Pierre and Jappeloup actually take the gold for their last ride in the individual equestrian jumping event. And what I thought was very sweet and also true to life was that after he received his medal, he did place it in the horses, the strappings, and had Jappeloup actually wear his gold medal as they trotted around the rink when they won.
But can we talk about that last jump? Where
Where he
'cause
where
I
he
had to watch
scaled the Grand Canyon across the jump.
with his arms in the air. Like, I've done it! And I had to watch the real race a couple of times like, "Huh, he's not doing it there." How would you let go of your horse's reins?
He knew he
Control
had it,
that
Jill. Knew he had it. When
The
great thigh
power of the
muscles.
thighs.
Yeah, really great thigh muscles. That's where it's at.
That was probably the only schmaltzy moment that they
Yeah.
really just leaned in.
But
But yeah,
actually,
overall
fun
Go ahead.
fact, I looked up Pierre in another article, and him and Nadia are divorced.
No.
And then I was trying to find some information on Nadia, and she really didn't come up on online. So, and Lisa was indeed their child. They only had one child. So I wonder what happened.
But we do know what happened to Jacques 3 months after he retired to the farm. He had a heart attack and died.
Yeah. At 16.
Yeah. So that was a little sad. He didn't get a very long retirement.
No. I don't
They
know if
left
they
that
used
part out.
him to sire more horses. They don't really say in any of the articles that I read. I would assume that they would have, just to continue that good jumping line.
I don't know if they had a chance if he was only retired for 3 months.
True.
I don't know how many stud options he had. And also, he wasn't genetically, he should not have been as good a horse as he was, and that was what they were saying so often. His temperament was not good. His size was too small. There was
Mhm.
so much about this horse that was wrong, and yet there he was with the gold medal. So, I don't know how I'm not a horse person, so horse people correct me, but would he have been in demand as a sire?
You would think just from all the medals, all the success he had, that somebody would have said, you know what, we want to put him to stud.
The tough thing about doing a language or a French movie is that it's harder to do the research because probably so much of it is in French and so much of the
Mm.
articles that would have talked about him are in French and that it's just tough to find.
Oh, another
But
fun fact is that Guillaume Canet actually started horse jumping again after the film. So he actually went back
nice.
into competitive horse jumping. I don't know how long he did, but he actually went back and tried his hand at it again. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
It's a nice movie filled with tropes. You know what's going to happen when you sit down and start. And I did not care. I really, really enjoyed it.
No, it was a
No,
pleasure to watch from start to finish. It really was. I mean, and some people may say, oh, well, it's a foreign film and you have to rely on subtitles, but it didn't feel difficult to watch. It just was a very enjoyable film. And who doesn't love a winner?
exactly. Exactly. I would agree on both of those counts, but the way they put the movie together isn't heavy-handed.
No.
And that I think made they just got the right touch with it. All right, Fran, thank you so much. What's on tap for our next movie?
So our next movie is called Zero to Hero and is about the first Paralympian from Hong Kong to win a gold medal in track and field. So I look forward to watching that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fran. We'll see you next time.
Great. Sounds good.
Thank you, Fran. Our movie club featuring Zero to Hero will be later in the spring. That sound means it is time for our history moment. All year long, we are featuring Seoul 1988 as it is the 35th anniversary of those games. My turn for a story, and because we did Jappeloup, I wanted to stay in the world of equestrian, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the dressage competition. And West Germany was the defending champions. They weren't at Moscow 1980, but they had won gold in 1976. So they are kind of a powerhouse team in the making. Maybe we'll find out. But leading the team is the veteran rider Rainer Klimke, who is in his 6th Olympics. He started competing in 1960 when he competed in the eventing competition in Rome. He switched to dressage, which is actually how he got his career start in the sport. And he did dressage for 64, 68, and 76. There's a little gap in there, and I'm not quite sure why, but this is one of those careers that is so long lasting, it's amazing. At LA in 1984, he rode the horse Ehrlich. They won double gold, and they were hoping to repeat in 1988. At Seoul, they had a new competition format. The Grand Prix was shortened to 7 minutes, which made the PF and passage elements more important. And the top 18 and anybody who tied them advanced to the final round, but there was a stipulation that countries could only have 3 riders in the final. So Rainer Klimke placed 7th in qualifying, but he was the 4th ranked German.
Rainer.
So no finals for him, no repeat for him in the individual competition. Who rose to the top? That would be 21-year-old first-time Olympian Nicole Uphoff. She was riding the horse Rembrandt, which was her very own horse, much like Jappeloup. I mean, we have a lot of interesting horses in this competition. Rembrandt was a gelding who was a handful, and he was very unpredictable. He would either win or he would come in last place. So the Uphoff family thought about selling him, much like the movie situation. She did hang on to him. He started Grand Prix level events in 1987.
Oh, so brand new.
Brand new. Here, got a first place on his first one.
This is my kind of horse.
It also might be your kind of horse because, well, not because he was tough to deal with, because you were not tough to deal with, but he would only practice when he was relaxed. And that made team prep difficult because other people on Team West Germany didn't understand her situation.
So Rembrandt had a little bit of a personality.
Exactly. So the other teammates didn't understand what was going on, got upset with her. She got angry, almost left Seoul, but our friend Rainer Klimke persuaded her to stay.
Oh, he was kind of fatherly with her, wasn't he? Oh, I like that.
Exactly. At Seoul, Rembrandt became a sensation. He wasn't perfect, but he showed himself impressively, and Uphoff handled him really well. So well that they didn't look like they were working, and Rembrandt truly danced in a way that no horse had ever done before. I know, I see this look on your face. I wish the listeners could see it because it reminds me of Tokyo, where you just fell in love with dressage.
I did, and just, it is really beautiful, and that his name is Rembrandt and he was particularly beautiful. It is like a movie. Why haven't we made this movie? We need more horse movies, apparently.
So Uphoff wins the individual gold. In the team competition, we also have a new format. 4 riders, but only the top 3 count towards the final score. Uphoff gets the best score on the team, followed by Monica Teodorescu on Ganymedes and Anne-Katrine Linsenhoff on Courage. Klimke's score is the one that's
Yes, but
dropped.
he was still the most important person there because he seems to have kept the team cohesion going.
Yes, I would agree. The team wins the total event. Uphoff has double gold. Her victory starts a dominance by field dressage riders in the sport. And even with that, she and Rembrandt sets new standards in the sport that no one can touch. They are just amazing and captivate audiences and judges for years to come. They went on to repeat double gold at Barcelona 1992. They did compete at Atlanta 96, but he was really on the decline then. After the preliminaries, he was in 8th place and he did not pass the veterinary inspection, so Uphoff decided to retire from competition. Rembrandt, the horse, retired later that year and passed away in 2001. We cannot underestimate what a popular and extraordinary horse Rembrandt was. Especially like when he died, just the accolades kept pouring in, much like for Jappeloup. People were just enthralled with this horse. FEI judge Nick Williams judged them both at Seoul and Barcelona at the Olympics, and both times he gave them a perfect 10. And when Rembrandt died, he said in Horse and Hound, quote, "I have had the privilege to judge many great horses, but Rembrandt was a special horse and an exhilarating horse to judge, as he epitomized impulsion with absolute lightness. Within 2 strides, he was in maximum extension, and within 2 strides, in maximum collection with lightness. But you can never see Nicola doing anything. They had an amazing telepathic rapport." That Seoul was really the start of the West German team, and that which became the German team, really dominating the sport since 1988. The only time Germany has not won gold in this event was in 2012 when they were upset by Team GB.
Welcome to TKFLASTAN.
It is the time of the show where we check in with our team Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests of the show who make up our citizenship of TKFLASTAN. What's going on in TKFLASTAN this week?
So, rifle shooter Tim Sherry competed in Austria at the Maiden Cup, had the 2nd and 3rd highest scores in qualifying, and finished the finals in 4th and 5th place. He went on to Germany for the H&N Cup, had a little bit of a tougher time there, but he adjusted his warm-up for the mixed team event, which helped him start the match better and finished less than a point out of the finals. And he is very happy with the start of his competitive season.
Yay! Wheelchair curler Steve Emt was named to Team USA for the World Championships, which take place in Richmond, British Columbia, March 4th through the 12th.
Ryan Shane won bronze in the relay at the ISU Junior Short Track World Championships, and he'll be competing at the Senior World Cup event in Dresden, Germany this weekend.
Also competing this weekend are beach volleyball player Kelly Cheng and partner Sarah Hughes. They will be at the Doha Elite 16 beach volleyball event.
And we've got some listener updates as well. Listener Manu has been at the European Figure Skating Champs and posting some great video footage on our Facebook group.
Listener Dan went to the Winter Universiade Games in Lake Placid.
And listener Meredith has been glued to the U.S. Figure Skating Champs this year, and next year has noted that they'll be in Columbus, Ohio. This could mean a meetup. So keep an eye on the Facebook group for information on that.
Super fan Sarah and her son went to a Team USA sled hockey exhibition in Dallas.
Did we get him on the sled and had him laughing the whole time?
Oh my gosh, he was waving and waving to all the athletes, but I would love to see him on a sled. I bet he would just love tooling around on the thing with the sticks.
And listener Nick, who worked making floats at Rose Bowl, spotted our TKFLASTANi John Neighbors while decorating the Rose Bowl Tournament of Roses Parade float.
So if you do anything sports related, let us know. Wear your Keep the Flame Alive shirt and snap pictures and share them with us. You can post them in our Facebook group or tag us on Insta and Twitter. You can also email them to us and we will possibly share them on the show and in our newsletter.
So the tag is Flame Alive Pod, and the Facebook group is Keep the Flame Alive Podcast Group.
All right, the sign up for the first round of the Paris 2024 ticket lottery has ended. The organizing committee president, Tony Estengay, has announced that over 2.5 million people have signed up for this, and results from the lottery will be announced in mid-February. 3 million of the 10 million tickets will be available in this first round, and because you are going to get a 3-pack, obviously not all 2.5 million will get to get tickets in this round. There's still more chances, so don't worry if you do. But if you do get in the round, let us know, because we'll be very excited for anybody who gets tickets in this first round.
And speaking of buying your tickets, the organizing committee has launched a partnership with the charity Secours Populaire, and it encourages ticket buyers to donate an additional €2, which will be used to pay for tickets and travel expenses for families, young people, senior citizens, and people with disabilities who could not otherwise afford to go to the competition. So if you are selected in the first round, there'll be a little option to add €2 to your purchase price.
I love this concept, but as we have talked offline, we don't love the idea that this concept is being funded for by other attendees and that the organizing committee is not making a donation for this.
Right? Just donate the tickets. Oh, no, you pay for them for other people, which I guess, they got to make their money somehow. And then you can feel good about having donated your money.
There you go. And hopefully, I mean, the thing is that it does provide opportunities for people to go who would not normally be able to go to the games, and you never know what could happen. We were at Podfest, and one of the speakers there grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, and then somehow got introduced to table tennis and became a very competitive table tennis player. So it opens doors for people. Also exciting, the Paralympic schedule is out. So there are going to be lots of finals in the evening on France time. So swimming, bocce, goalball, blind football will all have their finals in the evening, which for Europe will also be great because you're on prime time, and probably a good chunk of Africa too, because they'll be in the same time zone. The US, we're looking at what?
Afternoon, late morning, which is not bad. I mean,
No.
it's better than what we were dealing with China and Tokyo when you and I were up at 3:00 in the morning.
Right. Sorry, Australia.
It's our turn this time.
Right. The last day of competition is also going to feature mainly women's events. So that will be really exciting. They'll use it as a way to celebrate female athletes. Tickets will go on sale this fall. Prices are going to be as low as €15. So we will have a link to the schedule in the show notes. Also exciting Paralympic news for LA 2028. They have selected the sports for the Paralympic program. It's going to be all the sports that are going to be at Paris, and then the host has the option of adding paraclimbing or parasurfing if they want to, and maybe both. We'll find out.
Yeah, when I was looking at the schedule, I was thinking, what's different? And it really wasn't very different, which I guess is nice that these sports have become established enough that we have this consistency in the program.
But also seems like they're getting into the host city is allowed to add a few sports if they want to. It's just that the IPC has narrowed down the ones for them. If they took both paraclimbing and parasurfing, it would have a 24-sport program, 33 sports applied to be at LA 2028. So it's exciting that there's so much activity in the parasport world. It'll be interesting to see how that program expands, especially with trying to keep athlete numbers not at bay, but trying not to make it be such a huge event. But I think the Summer Games probably still has a lot of room to grow.
And all the classification changes because they're coming out with a whole new classification system for LA. So this is going to be fun to keep an eye on.
And that will do it for this week. Let us know what you thought of Jappeloup.
You can email us at flamealivepod@gmail.com. Call or text us at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. Our social handle is at flamealivepod. And be sure to join the Keep the Flame Alive podcast group on Facebook. And if you want to hear more from me, be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which is filled with other fun stories about this week's episode. You can sign up at flamealivepod.com.
And if you don't get that newsletter, get it, because it's always entertaining. I never know what's in it, and I get excited every time it shows up every week. All right, next week. I'm so excited about this. I mean, I know I'm excited about every interview, but this was one where we had no idea this existed, and it's an incredible topic to talk about. We're talking with anti-corruption lawyer Andy Spalding about the efforts being made to get corruption out of hosting the games. Fascinating conversation. Be sure to join us for that next week. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep the flame alive.